Hey guys, Richard Holden here. Who wants to see the other guy's big block Ford test? Who wants to go from 350 horsepower from a 460 all the way up to over 1,000 horsepower on a KAASE headed 557? And I'm also going to show you what went wrong. In this video, we're finally going to give some love to the other guys, the Ford 460. That's right, we always run big block Chevys and LSs, but it's time to give love to the 460 Ford guys. We're going to start out with a stock motor. We're going to go to a mildly modified motor. We're going to go to a wildly modified 460. Then we're going to step all the way up to a 557 stroker with KAASE P51 heads. And yes, we're going to exceed 1,000 horsepower. So why am I disappointed about this particular test? Let's check it out. Because we've taken a look at so many of the other LS and big block Chevy and small block Chevy, the normal kinds of motors, it's time to look at the other guys, and that really is a Ford 460 motor, because the Ford guys don't seem to get nearly as much love as the big block Chevy guys. So let's take a look at a combination, or a number of combinations we ran that were 460 based. It brought us all the way up to the 1,000 horsepower mark, but we're going to start obviously down at the bottom in a kind of stock baseline trim. So this was a 460. It originally came from a 1968 Lincoln application. This thing was rated at 365 horsepower. And we ran this thing basically in stock trim, kind of the way that we got it from the wrecking yard. Now, we made the following modifications to it. We found out that this thing had been rebuilt at one time in its life. It was already 60 over, but it had a factory replacement piston in it. It had the stock heads on it. This thing was rated from the factory at about 10.5 to 1 static compression, because this was an early 68 version. It came with a 4-barrel carburetor. It originally had an Autolite carburetor in it. Now we ran a Holley on it. We also ran it with 1 7/8 long tube headers. And we ran it with the mechanical water pump, but no other accessories on it. So run in this manner, the way that we got it from the wrecking yard, as I said, this thing was rebuilt, so it actually ran fairly good. So we started this 460 adventure off with a motor that was making almost 350 horsepower, 349.2. Torque was very good on this combination at 492 foot-pounds of torque. We ran it all the way down to 2,500 RPM. These things were known for their torque production because they were always put in these heavy vehicles. Like I said, this came from a full-size Lincoln. So this was a good start. But what we did was we went through a series of modifications, and we went through these one at a time. There's another video up on the step-by-step process that we went through on this. I just wanted to provide our starting point so we can see how much more power the other combinations when we get to the 557 with the KAASE heads. What we did then was went through a series of upgrades on this, and this is where that took us. Now what we did, these are very, very mild upgrades that we did. First thing we did was replace the factory cast iron low-rise 4-barrel intake manifold with a YN Stealth aluminum high-rise dual-plane intake manifold. We also put a very mild camshaft in it. It was a Comp Extreme Energy 262, still a hydraulic flat tappet camshaft, because that's what this motor came with. It was a 513, 520 lift split, a 218, 224 degree duration, and 110 degree load separation angle. We also took the factory heads and did some mild porting, just the same as a guy, basically the average guy at his house would do. Cleaned up the bowls a little bit, you know, did a little bit of port matching and stuff. We didn't go hog wild on it. We didn't have them professionally done. Just very minor, kind of standard porting mods to this thing. So we replaced the induction system, did some mild porting on the stock heads, and put a very mild stock camshaft in it. And after doing that, the power output jumped to 436 horsepower. So we got nearly 100 horsepower out of those mild mods. Torque stood over 500 foot-pounds at 507 foot-pounds of torque. But we made one more upgrade to this, and when I say one more, it was actually fairly significant upgrades, and we'll take a look at that power output. Here's what happened when what we did was contact the guys from MPG Heads, who are kind of the Ford, these 460 Ford, they're kind of they specialize in these. And what we did was we applied what they call their 600 horsepower package to this. So we upgraded a number of things. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you. So this thing, their 600 horsepower package actually made 609 horsepower. So apparently they know what they're doing. 609 horsepower. and 557 foot-pounds of torque. But we upgraded a number of things to get it to this power output. First of all, we upgraded the short block. We replaced the factory piston and put a flat top piston with valve reliefs in it, primarily so that we could put more camshaft in it, but obviously more compression is going to add power too. So we set things up. This was about 11-to-1. They also did extensive porting on a set of C8 heads. So these were basically fully ported by the guys at MPG who know a thing or two. And if you need any proof, I mean, take a look at the power output here. Also, these guys are Engine Masters finalists, guys. They really know what they're doing here. They also stepped up in camshaft. They put a solid flat tappet camshaft. It's not a roller, but a solid flat tappet cam. But their cam was fairly healthy. It was 638 lift, a 264, 268 degree duration, and 110 degree lobe separation angle. The other thing that we did was replace, obviously, the YN dual plane intake with a single plane design. This one actually came from a crate motor that the guys at Westech had. It's basically a big single plane from a 514 crate motor. It's a Victor Jr. style intake with a 4500 carburetor flange, and we ran a 1050 Dominator on this thing. Maybe a little bit overkill. You might be able to get the similar things with a 4150 style, but a good size single plane on this thing. We also ran a little bit bigger headers, 2 and an 8-inch headers. It had 173 roller rockers on it, which we also put on the milder package too. But the rockers didn't seem to change the power on the mild camshaft combination. But run with their 600 horsepower package, as I said, we made over 600 horsepower and 557 foot-pounds of torque. So that was a really good combination for a 460. But now let's take a look and see what happened when we set things up even further, something that we could actually apply these good KAASE aluminum heads to. Let's check it out. In our series on the 460, we started out with a mild combination and then we stepped up to a wilder 460 combination. Actually, it was slightly bigger than 460 because it was 60 over, but with the guys from MPG. So this was our stock one, and then we went to our... This is where we stepped up to the MPG combination and made over 600 horsepower, but that wasn't quite enough. So we actually took this motor to the next step. And in all honesty, for me, it was actually slightly disappointing. I knew that the KAASE P51 heads had a lot to offer, having seen them make a ton of power. And if I had KAASE do this motor, I'm sure it would have made 1,000 horsepower because he knows what he's doing. But I can tell you about the combination, and maybe you guys can let me know in the comments what you guys think went wrong with this combination, because it didn't quite make the power that I thought it should. But don't worry, we had a cure to get it to the 4-digit power level, and it was actually very simple. But here's what happened when we ran the, what we did was step up from a 460 to a 557 and added the KAASE P51 heads. We also had, obviously because we had a 557, we stepped up in camshaft as well too. And this was a 272-280 at 50 cam, so quite a bit bigger than the cam that we ran in the 460. And it was a 714 lift and 112 degree lobe separation angle. That camshaft came from Crane. It was a solid roller camshaft. We had the same intake manifold that we ran on the 460. It was the 4500 Victor intake manifold that Edelbrock did for the guys at Ford Racing. It had a 1050 Ultra Dominator carburetor on it. It had the same 2 and an 1/8 inch long tube dyno headers basically that we ran. An MSD distributor. The one thing that we did have on it that may have not improved the power as much as we wanted is the compression was not very high. We ran the combination was a 4.5 inch stroke and it was a 440 bore. We had a set of Pro pistons, also a Pro Comp stroker crank and rods were in it. And it was a dish piston, so the compression, when you did all the calculations, was slightly less than 10-to-1. It was only 9.8. Now, later on, we wanted to run nitrous and boost on this thing. We ended up not running boost on it, but we did end up running nitrous. There's a little foreshadowing of what's about to come up. But given the amount of camshaft that we ran, and we had really good heads on it, because we know those KAASE P51 heads flow really well and can make a ton of power. But this combination really only made, and when I say only, it's still fairly well, but it made 754 horsepower. But I thought that this combination should have been up like maybe another 100 horsepower from here. We've run other ported heads on 557s, albeit we did it with quite a bit more compression. So let me know if you think in the comments that that's why this thing didn't quite make the power that it did. And also, if you look at it, this thing made peak power at like 6,300 RPM, which is way low compared to other combinations that we've run. This thing made 713 foot-pounds to its 754 horsepower. Again, just not quite what we thought in terms of the power department. So I was a little disappointed in this combination, but undaunted, we thought, well, we're definitely going to still get to 1,000 horsepower. And the easy way to do that is to add a simple nitrous setup. So we added a NOS plate system for a 4500, and look at that. This thing also had problems when we ran the nitrous. We actually ran out of nitrous, basically, is what happened on our bottle. But we did manage to exceed 1,000 horsepower. It made 1,014, and the peak torque stood at 934 foot-pounds. We engaged the nitrous, obviously, as you can see. We hit this thing at about 5,000 RPM. We were the plan was to run it from 5,000 to 6,500 to have the numbers continue to go out. But as you can see, the drop off so much because it basically just, we ran out of nitrous in our bottle. So this whole thing was kind of problematic, and I apologize to KAASE for not showing what these heads could really do. Because like I said, I know I've seen stuff make way over 800 and 850, 900 with the KAASE heads, and so, but this combination did not do it. But let me know in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. Obviously, compression was definitely one of these things, and with this kind of camshaft, with a 272, 280 camshaft, obviously we could run more camshaft in a 557 combination like we did with the A460 heads, and that video is up as well. But there's a lot more power to be had, and we didn't do it on this, and I blame myself. Let's get to our conclusion. Okay, guys, what do we learn from this little adventure on our big block Ford upgrades? First of all, we learned the following thing. Big block Fords respond to upgrades the same way that every other motor does. I mean, it's pretty good to begin with. It's very torquey. And then when you do the normal kinds of upgrades, mildly ported heads, a cam, a good intake manifold, it responds to those. If you get more aggressive in the compression and the head flow and the cam timing, good things happen. And then when we step up into displacement, even better things happen. But it also shows us that dyno testing and engine builds don't always go as we plan. Now, this motor should have made and could have made a lot more power. So again, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Here are the two areas that I'm thinking may have made a big difference. The first thing, obviously, is compression. At 9.8 to 1, this thing should probably be 3 points higher in compression, somewhere in the high 12s to 13 to 1 or so. And that would add about, if we look at 3 to 4% increase in power per full point of compression, that's going to add another 80 or 90 horsepower, which is going to put us in the like close to mid 800 numbers, which is more where I think that this combination should be. The other thing to think about is the oiling system. Now, we had a Milodon pan on this, which is pretty good, but I think that we could have run maybe a deep sump pan and a windage tray and a kick out, and you know, and we could have improved that. The Fords are not as bad with the oiling system as they are, as the Chevys seem to be, but on a big block with lots of stroke, obviously those kinds of things can help. I just think that this combination didn't make the power that it could have, given how well those KAASE heads flow and how well I've seen them work on other combinations in the past. But this combination didn't do that. So it just goes to show you sometimes things work out really well and sometimes they don't. And usually it's this guy's fault. Armature holder guys, make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff, and I will keep testing.